My secret, just do something that ain't nobody ever done before, but make it sound like something that's always been there forever.
Welcome to This Filipino American Life, a podcast that explores the nuanced experiences of Filipinos in the United States. At iba pa. I am Elaine Delalis, and I'm joined by my fellow hosts,
Ryan Carpio, Joe Bernardo,
and
Mike.
Producer Mike. And we have...
It's Girly.
What? That's like 2 in a row.
2 in a row.
Woohoo!
Maybe this will be more habit.
Hi, Girly.
Hi,
Hi.
Too much. Joe's
Joseph.
really happy.
I'm happy you're here, girly.
Thank you.
Me too.
Not you, Joey.
Nandito si Officer Collado.
Oh, Joe. How funny.
Joseph.
So I'm so happy to see you all.
I know. I miss you guys.
I missed you all, and I missed our TFAL of this episode. Thank you for supporting us, Juke Jose.
What? Juke.
Go Juke.
Juke?
Do you know them, Ryan?
Yeah. Juke Jose.
So terrible. You don't know them at all. But Juke Jose, you're going to get a horn.
Is that the gift we're giving now?
Yeah.
The gift of horn.
The gift of horns.
Juke, is it related to Lugao Jose?
Oh, my God.
To Goto Jose?
Oh, God.
I don't even get that.
I don't either.
You don't? Juke is Chinese for porridge.
I did not know
Wow,
that.
too meta, too fast.
Yeah, seriously.
I was like, speaking of Chinese and Chinese people.
What?
I don't know. Is that a good segue? I'm just trying. I'm reaching here.
Yeah, what are you
Okay.
talking about, dude?
I'm going to talk about Crazy Rich Asians.
Yeah. So excited.
Sorry, is that about Chinese?
It's about Singapore.
Oh.
It's about a lot of
Chinese people.
different
Crazy Rich Asians, though.
Okay, just in general, Crazy Rich Asian. Like, what a segue.
You mean crazy rich East Asians?
Oh.
well, primarily, yeah, sure.
I mean, yes. They're
Okay.
from Singapore, though. So they
Oh,
have a
okay.
weird accent.
I have friends from
Weird accent.
Oh my God.
I have friends
But
from
there's
Singapore.
so many different Asians in Singapore.
I know. Singapore,
They have
they
weird accents.
they are Chinese. They have Malay,
Malaysian.
Malay, and then they have the British influence because they were colonized by the Brits for so long.
Right. And there's all the Filipinos.
And there's Filipinos servants or something.
South
because of the
Asians, a lot of Indians
diaspora.
there.
Yeah.
I really hope my friends from Singapore listen to this.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know. They
They have okay. So when I worked in a different department,
law.
yes,
Singapore. Yeah.
yes, whatever you just said, yes,
Yes, la.
Yes, La.
They have like a sing-songy accent, and it's kind of like it sounds Asian, but then at the same time it sounds British when they speak, and then they end everything
La.
with la.
Really?
Yeah.
Tesla. La.
That's a good one. You missed it.
Oh my
Ryan and
God.
Joe just fist bumped each other on that joke.
Oh, man.
That one's really good.
This
But-
is going to be good. Okay.
But Crazy Rich Asians, Girly, you were the one that got me into the book. Tell us about Crazy Rich Asians and what's it about.
So the first book, Crazy Rich Asians, it's actually part of a trilogy.
Thanks.
And
Spoiler alert. I was hoping that I didn't know it was a trilogy.
Stupid.
No, I'm serious. I don't know anything
so
about
the first book focuses on Rachel, a Chinese American who is from California. And she meets
Ross.
Nick Young.
Oh, sorry.
Nick Young. And Nick is from...
No, that's his name. It's Nicholas
It is.
Young.
It's Nicholas Young.
Swaggy P?
Play for the
I have no
Lakers?
idea what you guys are talking
Nick Young is a
about.
player.
Nick Young
for the-
used to be.
Sorry, I'm not into it.
Girly's like, no.
Okay, go ahead.
Can I finish my story about the book?
Sorry. I keep on laughing about Tesla.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'll get out of it. Yeah.
Okay, so Nick Young is from a very affluent family in Singapore. Like, they own lots and lots of assets. But he downplays it, and they go to Rachel and Nick basically go and visit the family in Singapore. And this is the first time that Rachel realizes how affluent he really is, or just kind of his whole background. And so she's from a working family, single parent family. And she also starts to uncover aspects of her family history, just a little bit through the experience that she has with Nick, his family, and his friends.
Cool.
So it's set like in America, in Singapore, in China, and all of those areas. And it is now going to be a movie that comes out.
This is what everyone's talking about.
Yes,
Yeah.
in this month. Hopefully this will come out because it's a bonus. And the movie stars Constance Wu as Rachel Chu from Fresh Off the Boat, Michelle Yeoh, the famous and legendary actress Michelle Yeoh, Henry Golding, who plays Nick Young, who is super hot and has a lot of abs.
Yes.
A lot of abs.
A lot of abs.
So
Well, and Michelle,
I don't know
Michelle
if you've
Yeoh,
seen my abs. There's a lot of it.
I think,
what?
I think this it's very absent.
Oh my god. So Michelle plays Nicholas
Nick
Young's,
Young's
mother.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like
And then
this.
there's other actors in it, like Aquafina. She plays Rachel's best friend, Picklin. Ken Jeong plays Wai Moon, so that's Picklin's dad. And then Jimmy O Yang from Silicon Valley plays Bernard Tai.
And Nico Santos from Superstore
Nico.
is in it as well.
Yes, and I don't know who
He plays a cousin of Nick.
Oh, is he Alistair?
Yeah, no. He's the...
I'd like Nico Santos to
Which
play
one
my
is
cousin
he?
in real life.
Oliver.
He's Oliver.
Sin.
Oliver.
Oh, okay. So Nico Santos is the one Filipino American actor that we do know.
Well, Chris Aquino is apparently in it as well.
Playing herself?
She played... No.
Oh.
She plays the Sultana. So she's a family friend.
Interesting.
So the other thing about this is that Nick's family is friends with all of these
Yeah.
like empresses.
So she almost plays
queens,
herself. Game ka na ba?
Almost.
Game na.
Game, nah, I did know that. Well, it's one of the backstory is like they're so rich, people don't know how rich they
Yeah.
are. Like they're so rich, you have no idea what their financial portfolio
No.
is.
So they're crazy rich.
Well, yeah. Well, so I originally picked up this book during a time when I was working in an environment where I was actually working with or just having to deal with a lot of affluent Asian immigrants or Asian Americans. And I just kind of felt out of my comfort zone. So I thought, like, reading this book would be a fun thing to do, to get a little bit of context and also to kind of escape all of the noise from, things coming out of Washington, D.C. and
And the book came out in 2013. And so I think because of the popularity of the book, it then was sold and then turned into a film. And it is now 2018, so it's taken quite some time for it to come to fruition on screen. Right?
And the director sold his rights to the book for $1. $1 because he wanted to control. He wanted to make sure that the film,
director or the writer?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's the writer.
Oh, okay.
The author of the book.
Kevin Kwan.
Yes. Because he wanted to make sure that the movie was really going to be made the way that he wrote it. Like, there are stories where he says one company wanted to replace Rachel with a white actor.
Oh.
All right. So my question is, why is there so much hype about the movie?
That's a good question. I think there's so much hype about the movie because it's the first movie in 20, 25 years that has an all Asian cast. The previous closest thing to it would have been Joy Luck Club,
Right.
with from Amy Tan's book. And so
Mainstream movie.
mainstream movie,
Who,
correct.
who released it? Like
This one's going to be on Warner Brothers.
Warner Brothers. Got it.
And so initially, I gave no thought to this film. I thought, oh, this is a stupid book. It is. I don't even bother. I don't know anything about this world. And then a podcast, our former guest, Karen Thompson, her podcast, Pop Rocket, made Crazy Rich Asians their summer book read. And so I thought, you know what? I listened to this show. I want to keep up. And Girly had it, so she let me borrow it. And I read it in legit a week.
Yeah, it's really easy to read.
It's like a 500-page book, but it's a soap opera. It felt like I was watching, or I felt like I was reading a teleserie that I had seen from the Philippines. So when I think of what this movie will be, it's like, I imagine it's going to be one of those like teleseries, but it's a
In long
Hollywood
form.
Yeah, a Hollywood version of it.
Cool. Interesting. I don't know much about it at all. I've just been following social media on it since, I guess, the casting, when there was like some stories about like who should be casted as what. So I'm looking forward to what people think about it.
So this is a film that a lot of Asian American community members have been trying to get people galvanize the community to watch. But now I think there's a little bit of backlash that I've read, that some people have critiqued the movie and critiqued the whole movement, saying that like this movie doesn't represent their Asian American experience, their experience in general. For example, some people are saying, "Oh, this is very much an East Asian." That was kind of my reference to it, but it's a very East Asian centric story. It's really about the 1%, so it doesn't represent the whole Asian American community, and now they don't feel like it should be a movie that we should all galvanize around. And I think there's been debates about that in the Twitterverse.
Well, the book is not written to represent all Asians. It was written to represent, it was written specifically about a family.
Correct.
Like I would support other stories that, talk about Filipino Americans, of course, but that's not what the intent of the book was.
Yeah. No, and I think you can't rest the entire community on one film. Like we had this kind of discussion about Black Panther and how people were contacting us and saying we should make a Filipino Black Panther, and it's like, no, we should make a Filipino story that's a Filipino story. So Crazy Rich Asians is a story about crazy rich Asians. It's about a certain lifestyle that is in Singapore, that the new money rich in mainland China and whatnot, and in Hong Kong. It is that world, and our experience is going to be completely different. And you said that you worked with people in that area, so this gave you an insight into it. When I was at USC, on a tertiary level, I think I met students who embodied this lifestyle.
Yeah.
Where they would tell things about like having drivers, or they would, be easily have access to X, Y, and Z thing. And I'd be like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Where I used to work, the area, like I would hear stories of people going to like really luxury car dealerships and just throw down cash for a car.
Yes.
And that was normal
Yeah.
to them. And typically Asian customers who would do that.
Yeah.
So do you think we're galvanizing towards the content of what Crazy Rich Asians is, or do you think the galvanization should be about like, hey man, Warner Brothers did something that, mainstream movie about Asians that has been done in quite some time, since like the Joy Luck Club? Because does it, I guess I'm asking, does it matter what the content is? This just happens to be about crazy Rich Asians or Rich Crazy Asians.
Well, I think it's like a story, right? Like this is a book that swept the nation, in terms of like everybody has it in their like bags or in their e-readers or whatnot. Just kind of like how 50 Shades, like 5 years ago, like kind of took everybody by storm, and like everybody call it mommy porn, and like they were like reading that. So now it's like everyone's reading this as like it's escape.
Yeah.
It's like why people would initially watch Real Housewives, because you're like, I want to watch these rich people live their life and like escape from my own life. So this is a way.
Yeah, and just if the movie is as close to the book as I remember, like I don't think it's Oscar material necessarily.
I don't think it will be.
I mean, but still, it's still going to be a fun experience.
Sure.
And for me, I think, to your question, Ryan, I think for me, it's the latter. Like, I am really supportive of this because any major studio has not created a movie that has had a cast that's all people of color, all Asian Americans since, Joy Luck Club.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's where people are trying to galvanizing the community in order to support this film, so that in the future, more films about
this.
Asian Americans like this will be greenlighted.
Yeah.
Greenlit.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. But then there is that critique that, well, why is this the film that people should be all hyped up about when it's, it doesn't represent us?
Well, where are the other films that will?
Yeah.
Well, why is that? Well, I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Sure.
But why is that the one that gets greenlit and not
Yeah, and
another film?
I mean, Girlie's right. Like, where are the other films though? Like, you gotta
Debut.
which was
Stop.
but I mean, we can laugh at it, but that movie was 15 years ago.
No, it was more than
18.
that.
18. Was it really?
We're old.
Okay, but then think about it. That movie
It's
was
already a debut.
It's already dead. I mean,
It will have its own debut.
oh my god, the debut should totally have its own debut.
Go ahead. I want to be a flower.
Stupid.
I want to be a candle. We'll flip the gender roles. No, but what I'm saying, like, that movie was so long ago, and it's just a matter of how, like, at the end of the day, the studio will follow the dollar.
Right.
So if the community backs this movie through dollars, then they'll make more.
And the reason why the studio caught wind of this book to begin with was because it was generating such an an economic argument as a book.
Yeah. And you can't deny it that, if the dollars follow this film, that they're gonna, like, this is through Warner Brothers and that's just coming out, but it's not going to say another studio is going to be like, we want to make our own Crazy Rich Asians. And so we want to make our own story. So what else is out there? And it'll spark the folks who are actors and writers now, and they'll be like, if they have a script ready, they can get optioned. It'll open the door for them. And given that, like, there are people who are currently advocating for other people of color, like Ava DuVernay, for example, with her production of Queen Sugar, and how she had all women directors direct every episode of Queen Sugar this season. Like, she's creating the avenue for females, for women to direct. So Crazy Rich Asians, this film can create an avenue for more Asian or Asian American stories to be told. But at the end of the day, you need to follow the mighty dollar, and that's where it's going to help.
I mean, how well did, like, Joy Luck Club do? And did that beat a path down to, like, having other Asian American cinema being generated in a way? I mean, I do remember around that time that, like, at least in a certain segment of, like, the blockbuster, usually like kind of the indie / foreign film section or whatever. I mean, there was a lot more stuff there, but none of it was like Asian American per se, right?
I would say it was easier to make a film back then, just because I think the economics of filmmaking has changed, and in that mainstream studios are really only looking to make blockbusters.
So in 1993, when the Joy Luck Club came out, it was a limited release. So it came out in 3 theaters, and it made $159,000 in 3 theaters. The wide opening weekend, it made $2.2 2,048,000. And total domestic, it made $32 million.
It's quite a lot for like
In the
that era,
90s, that's a
especially.
lot of
It's
money.
a ton of money in '93.
And
What was the budget? Does it
the
say?
budget,
I'm sure it's in Wikipedia somewhere.
I'm trying to, I don't know if it's here. I just see the gross here.
So I have a theory too. Having never read the book, and I guess we're gonna end up watching the movie at some point, right? That maybe if it wasn't so much about like, or at least had like wealth as a central characteristic of the story, that more people would like jump on it, regardless of the fact whether or not it's like really representing the entire like Asian American experience. Because like I feel like there's kind of like this, number one, this desire for representation that a lot of us have always kind of worked towards or like hoped for, right? But those same people who kind of look for that are also the same people who are tired of like the tropes around like Asian Americans being successful, rich, being in a better like social and economic situation than like other people of color. And so we're very leery of the idea that we're going to be represented in this way, in this highly visible way, and celebrate that because they're kind of contradictions in a way for us. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think like that's, at least for me, knowing nothing about the book and and have not seen the movie yet. It's like on the one hand, it's like, representation matters and we want to make sure that we have diverse faces and stories. And there's nothing invalid about telling a story like this one. And at the same time, is it the one that like I'm going to be championing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if I'm about to say that, but also like, just from a visual aspect, it's kind of like, well, that's not my experience, not because I'm not Chinese or not Singaporean, but because I don't know what that world is like. And there's one thing to be said about like cinema and literature as like escapist kind of tools, but at the same time, like my hope is that somehow or another this also leads to kind of like more diverse economic stories being told, not just racial or I mean. I think that's where it becomes a little bit more complex for me, I guess.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think it's very problematic to feature rich people when you know that their wealth was on the backs of a lot of labor, invisible labor, especially Filipino labor.
Yeah.
A lot of domestic workers work in Singapore.
Yeah.
And they're Filipino.
Yeah.
And are they featured in this movie? I just think I know representation matters, but like why does this have to be the film
Right.
for us to like? Why is this the pioneering film for our community?
But it's not. It's technically not the pioneering film, right? Because it's
Pioneering in this day and age.
Or I think we want something to be that, and this is the closest we've gotten so far.
I think it's just a matter of like every 20 years the studio system is giving us a carrot. And so it's like at a certain point we need to be able to like create an avenue or create like a path for it. And Crazy Rich Asians, like you can't make one movie and then think like you're going to rest on this, right? Crazy Rich Asians has the advantage of it's a trilogy of books. So there at least will be 3, maybe 4 movies. The way that they do how
Trilogies these days.
that's how they do it, right? Like with books, you
Part 3, Part 1. Part 3,
part two. Exactly. I mean, that's how they did it with Harry Potter. So it's got a built in like that they can do a long-term financial plan. So this film gives the opportunity for more films and more actors for others. So is it like, does it have to be it? No, it could have been something else, but it's right now it's what we have. And if you don't want to watch it, you don't have to, but you should still buy a ticket. Because I did know somebody who, when Black Panther came out, she could not watch the movie, but she still bought a ticket because she knew of the power and impact of the dollar and then why it needed it to have one.
And if you do that, do it on opening weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I understand the arguments that have been put forth. I don't necessarily disagree with them either. But yeah, I mean, like, I just keep thinking like the economics of it and how many movies get to this level. And if you don't support it, then there is no economic argument for doing more of these things. And I mean, even if there are future movies within this trilogy, it's still going to be about this rich family and all their
Totally.
rich people problems.
It's like Mano Po in the Philippines. Have you ever seen that?
No, what is that?
It's like a
It's like 7 or 8 movies long. like,
yeah,
series,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
What?
It's kind of like Crazy Rich Asians, but Crazy Rich Chinese
Filipino?
Filipinos.
Chinese, yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy Rich Chinoys?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
literally.
It was a successful kind of movie series in the Philippines.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah. So
Is it fair to say, like, can we treat this as just a movie, as a or I know there's this kind of craving to be for this movie to represent something. It's fiction, with maybe some truths to it, of course. But is it okay to just go, oh, it's a movie, and not be caught up in the representation aspect of it? Because I feel like, you know, what you're saying, Elaine, is like, hey, if you don't agree with it, at least buy a ticket because you know how important it is. But can it just be a movie, or is that it's doing a disservice in the larger scheme of things?
No, I think it can be.
Okay.
Like it's nuanced, right?
Sure.
Like it is a movie. We're all gonna, if we watch it, we watch it.
Right.
But it's kind of like Black Panther is a movie.
Right.
You either watch it or you watch it. And we're always gonna pinpoint that because that was a movie that was recent that had like an all people of color cast that had the type of impact that this potentially may
Sure.
have. So yeah, you can view it as a movie, but it's also like culture isn't in a vortex, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not in a bubble, and
it still has some kind of.
there's going to be some
Sure.
impact.
But I feel like there's an audience out there, you know, that can say, gosh, it's just a movie. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to generate all of this, right?
all this like debate. And,
Right.
Yeah.
Like, hey, it's a movie. It
is.
might be on the quality of the writing and the art and the direction or whatever it might be. It might be. I haven't seen it. I mean, it comes out in later on. But can it just be a movie that happens to be about crazy rich Asians?
Yeah, I mean, and also in the book, the author, he has kind of these side notes at the bottom of some of the pages where he kind of he knows that the characters are being over dramatic, so he talks about that, and
Yeah.
even the he uses, you know, specific languages like Malaysian, Singaporean, and he'll say like the kind of double meanings of
Correct.
them. So he knows, like, so there is this ounce of knowledge that, like, it's just ridiculous the way that these people lead their lives. And so Rachel's character and Nicholas's character kind of like bring like that. It's the connection to people who don't either don't
grounds.
want to be in that world or are not from it at all. And yeah, it is.
It grounds it in a certain sense of reality that like everyday people will be able to get to. And even like then, like they're the most grounded characters, but they're also in like regular terms, like they're both PhDs. They're
Yeah,
both
they're both
faculty
professors.
they're professors at NYU. Like there's still a level of prestige to what their jobs are. But at the same token, it's kind of like, that's hilarious to me that the most grounded people are the ones who are still living like some type of like upper middle class life in New York City, you know?
So I think to answer your question, Ryan, at least for my opinion, is yeah, it is a movie. I didn't really think too much about it. Like I'm not one of those people who will be like in line during opening weekend.
You're not going to cosplay as a rich Asian?
Although Gurley is more passionate about it than I am. But I'm just not. To me, it's a movie,
Right.
You know,
that's where that's kind of where I'm at.
And then what really sparked this conversation is really just the conversation that
Right.
that's
Yeah.
around it, and the debates, and people are very passionate about how and what should represent us in the mainstream audience. It's a fucking movie.
right. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and then like I know Black Panther was kind of impactful for the African American community. A lot of people were behind it, but You know what's more important than Black Panther the movie? Black Lives Matter.
Right.
Like that's way more important and to garner attention for the African American community than Black Panther. And I just think like the absence of it within the Asian American community, even the Filipino American community, like that this is what we have to gravitate and like debate about. Right. I mean, the closest movement we have is the Filipino food movement, and like,
and we've been eating forever.
We all have high cholesterol and high blood pressure because of our food.
By the way, pass me the pastillas.
We really do have pastillas on the table.
But it goes to show again, we've talked about this multiple times in our podcast, about like this craving of representation that we kind of gravitate toward things that maybe doesn't necessarily warrant an extensive conversation about representation in film. This could be just an appreciation for like, Crazy Rich Asians. We can finally watch something. I think there's an audience out there who just want to watch this, that treat this as, hey, the book was amazing. It was an easy read. It's cool to see Asians on big screen, released by Warner Brothers.
So
and then
I agree, because like we speak as Asian Americans, right? We speak as Filipino Americans, but this book sold millions of copies, and not just Asian Americans and not just Filipino Americans read this book. So in the audience is going to be like your Black woman, your white woman, your Latino woman, a man, blah, blah, blah. Like anybody who read the book will want to watch this movie. Right. And so they're going to be in the audience. Right. And it's kind of like, you know, Eat, Pray, Love was a book that a lot of people read, and then it put a lot of butts in seats. And it wasn't like it's about a white lady learning about everything and finding herself. Like no one give a shit about it that way, right? Because like that is technically the norm. Right. Or even like Wild by Cheryl Strayed.
Because there's so many stories.
Because there's so many stories about like white women finding themselves. Right. So it's not a big hype thing. But
in non-white spaces.
You know. But so like when we would, like if I watched Eat, Pray, Love, I don't think I did, but like I would have been like, oh yeah, I read that book. Oh yeah, okay, that's cool that she got to see it. I would have been one of those people that I don't look like the woman on the screen, but I would have watched the movie, right? So this, like, I think the dollars of our community will definitely, we insist upon it, right? That like we want our community to watch it, but I think there's also a lack of faith in that the general audience, the non-people of color community, want to see this. Yeah. Because I do think that like non-POCs want to see this.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. If white people watch this, and this is being contrarian, if white people watch this, what impression will they have after the movie about Asian Americans?
Go ahead.
You go ahead first, Girly.
Well, I was going to say model minority.
So for me, I'd like to think on just this being a movie. I want them to think this is just a movie, right? Because this is where kind of like the line of a fictional art, and the big screen. We pay so much attention to what's on the big screen, right? That it doesn't have to just. It's a fictional thing, right? I think we are so much in search of that what could be put on by a Warner Brothers out there, that it needs to represent a majority of people. The story might be just really, really good. So I hope, I know Girly had a quick answer to it. I hope it doesn't mean that we get boxed in again. What I really hope is that when people do see the quality of film and the writing on this, is that it says, oh, let's open up to more creative things out there.
Oh, look at your rose-colored glasses.
I know, but the point I'm trying to make is, when if we had done this for another movie that's not about crazy Asians, if we had done this for a movie like, I don't know, Better Luck Tomorrow, right? Something like that, right? Would we have the same conversation of like, what are they trying to represent?
Well, we did have that conversation.
That's my point.
The conversation around Better Luck Tomorrow was more about like, is this a poor representation of Asian Americans because it wasn't Crazy Rich Asians,
right?
Really?
Oh, because it was showing like deviant Asian Americans,
which is like, which no, that's an interesting contrast because I think like now that I think about it, like any of the fears that we have about Crazy Rich Asians is around this idea that like, is that a poor representation?
But
Or-
that was the conversation that happened with
yeah,
Better Life
exactly.
Smile
So I
came
mean,
out.
like, you know, at the end of the day, like any portrayal, I think, is never going to match the
Exactly.
monolithic idea of what Asian American is, and
Correct.
it shouldn't.
Exactly.
And if you think about it,
Correct.
none of the movies that we watch match the, you know,
Right.
So
No.
like maybe it's just a matter of like what you guys are really trying to get at is like, let's just see it as a movie,
Right.
enjoy it for what it is.
Now,
Hopefully that leads to some other conversations
right.
too.
In addition to that, like, let's make more of them, and Warner Brothers fucking pay attention, or big
Exactly.
production companies pay attention, so
But-
that we don't have to keep having this conversation.
Well, my thing is like, why do we have to have these big studios to make these stories? Like,
well, you don't. But if you want if you want people to watch it, it has to come out of one.
well, what I'm saying is like, the media has been so kind of democratized because of the internet. There's a lot more ways to get your stories out there.
Yes.
Right? It's easier to make a movie now than it was back then, and it's easier to, you know, have this podcast, for example, to have
Yes.
these stories,
Sure.
because of the internet. But I also think like when you are always trying to gain acceptance from a mainstream audience, you're kind of walking through a slippery slope, because you're gonna have to compromise. You're gonna always have to negotiate, and kind of
Dilute.
dilute, sell out, whatever, like whatever kind
I
of
think
things you have to.
that it's more like, yes, it's the democratization of creativity, but then it's not a democratization of the money that's coming in. And so if you're going to make a movie about Crazy Rich Asians and the lifestyle they need, it's got to be backed by a major studio, because they've got the
They got the money.
to produce a film like that. And so like I don't know where my train of thought is going.
Well, do you think it's an aspiration for any movie creators out there to say, you know, I would love for Warner Brothers to release my movie? I guess that's one aspect to look at.
Oh,
right?
this is where I was going with it.
Okay.
Studio systems don't make mid-level movies anymore.
Yeah.
You either make a giant blockbuster or you make
Like indie.
an Oscar grab.
Yeah.
So this movie is unique in that it's not any of those. So
that's an
that's
interesting
one way to look at it, right? It's not a superhero movie, but it's not Oscar bait either, because it's the middle of summer. You don't put out Oscar bait in the middle of summer,
Right.
So that's in and itself is a unique thing. And then to also just put it on there, like, yeah, if you're gonna make a movie about rich people, you need to have a studio, because if we were to try and make this movie, it would look terrible. I mean, and yes, there is advances in like making movies on phones, and you can get a gimbal and you can try and make it stylized, but it's not gonna look like a giant palace in Singapore,
Right.
that an old lady has lived in for her entire life and has like servants, like, and the costumes, and like, you know, like I
Yeah,
don't even
yeah.
know what a Goyard bag is, but like they talk about it in the movie all the time. So yeah.
And I guess at the end of it all, when it comes to representation, is we just as a people of color, we just want to be able to access that, to be able to tell our stories in all sorts of different ways, where, you know, the content and the artistry of it becomes its own story, as opposed to like, oh, does the fictional story represent all of Asians? No, actually, the working Asians represent the Asians.
Yeah.
As opposed to the fictional story of whatever it might be.
And just think, like Rachel Chu, the main actress, she never thought she would ever be able to get a major motion starring role.
Constance Wu.
Constance Wu. Oh yeah, sorry, Constance Wu. So like this is like, she got that. She gets to be the sex symbol. She gets to be the lead in an industry where she thought she would never get to have that. And that, I think, is like a big thing. And Mike is telling us to wrap up. So any last thoughts? I say, yes, go watch Crazy Rich Asians.
Go watch
It's going to be
it.
fun.
Right.
Ryan just grabbed a fly from the air.
Cool. I'm done.
Any last thoughts? Any last words?
I'll probably watch it.
I would watch it. I just don't think. My opinion is that I think our community shouldn't put all our eggs into one basket.
Agree.
Correct.
Diversify.
That's always a good thing.
Yeah, I understand mainstream media does have an effect on how people how Asian Americans are treated, or how they are, the associations that are tied with Asian Americans or Asians. But I don't know. Don't expect like a egalitarian movie in a system and a structure that isn't egalitarian. I don't know if that makes sense.
Way to be a proletariat.
Nux, Uncle Joe.
Well, what I'm saying is like people who are very, very critical of that not representing. It's kind of like, well,
it's been that way for a while.
Yeah, mainstream movies shouldn't be the avenue for which you could put all your eggs into that basket, hoping to create kind of real change.
Right. I agree.
Mike?
I mean, God, this sounds like it's like, yeah, until you own the means of production, how can you expect to see anything created that is representative of your experience and your... But I mean, because as we were saying all this, I mean, I keep thinking about when's the last time any movie has really touched upon that real, genuine experience of the people in any way whatsoever, any book, anything. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, like, to expect the Hollywood system or Hollywood or anything in which big dollars and big budgets are attached to represent anything other than what it's meant to represent is kind of a false thing to expect. Yeah. So I mean, like on the one hand, like, you know, those stories will never come out of these studios, and it's really up to the indies and like the internet, you know, filmmakers and things like that to kind of really tell those stories. And that's a shame that it won't get the same distribution more often than not. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, I think like seeing this as a movie and a movie that we should probably support in some way, so at least we get some representation in some space, but at the same time not letting that be the one thing that we say like, oh, mission accomplished, and continuing to kind of go down the path of creating kind of our own spaces, our own art, our own films. I think it's just, you know, it adds to the discourse, it adds to kind of the body of work, and it adds to kind of like our representation in the space, but it should also not replace anything that we're currently doing. We shouldn't like just say that, okay, now we've done that, and now we, you know, now
everything's all right now.
Yeah. So, you know, so agreeing with a lot of you, but also kind of recognizing the fact that are we, you know, do we expect too much, and are we expecting too much out of all these different factors? And should we just be realistic about what it is and be fine with that, because we're fine with that for non-Asian movies, non-Asian American movies. We accept that as just the norm. So why should it be any different for, you know, for better or for worse?
Yeah. Right.
All right, so Elaine had to leave, but so I'll close it out. Thank you very much for listening to us. If you have an opinion about this, call our voicemail, 805-394-TFAL. Elaine came back, so if you want to sign us off.
805-394-TFAL.
She just wanted to put her voice, like her here's our phone number voice on that.
All right. Thank you.
This Filipino American Life is produced by Michael Nailat. Our intro and outro music is by Roger Habon, aka 10.4 Raj. Resident reality checker Girly Colado, legal advisor Rianne Fajardo, and graphic design by Vincent Collyer.